Did you know that Android apps run on Horizon OS? Today I'm going to talk about why we made that possible, what use cases these apps serve, what use cases people are willing to pay for, and how you can bring your own Android app to the Meta Horizon store in 3 steps. My name is Marcus Leyenbecker, and I'm a PM on the developer platform team. This team is essentially working on Meta's interface with developers like all of you, and we essentially are motivated to make you as productive and efficient as possible. We build the toolkit that makes it easy to build applications and to monetize them. So last year at Connect, we made a big announcement that it's now possible to put Android apps on the Meta Horizon store. And let me clarify what we mean by Android apps. We mean applications that were actually originally designed to run on phones, tablets, or TVs, and now you can run them on Horizon OS. And these don't appear like immersive 3D experiences, right? They appear as what we call panels. These are sort of rectangular boxes that users can resize to the size that they please, and they can use multiple at the same time. This is what this looks like. So last year at Connect, we made this announcement, and now, since then, a variety of apps have been published to the Meta Horizon store. Let's start with WhatsApp. This is a great example of an Android app running on a Quest. When I am immersed in VR, let's say I'm playing a game, what happens to me is that in the other room, my phone is on some table, and I keep hearing it ding away while my friends and family are trying to contact me. And this creates the sense of urgency that I want to rip off my headset and run over and check what is going on. With WhatsApp in VR, that goes away, right? I can just check my messages right there. I can even do this in multitasking. While I'm doing other things, I can just keep this on the side. We even have group calling on WhatsApp in VR, which makes it possible for me to call my friends and then play a game together. Another great example of an Android app is Twitch. So Twitch is what I use particularly in pass-through mode, in situations where I don't have a large screen available. So obviously, when I have a TV, I watch Twitch on my TV. But let's say in my kitchen, I don't have a TV. What I personally do is I make Twitch really huge, and then I just go about my day of emptying the dishwasher while I'm watching Twitch and watching my favorite creators. We even have the ability built into Horizon OS of Focus View, which is essentially a sort of light version of a virtual cinema around any video that is playing. And what my team and I have learned over the last year is that essentially there are 2 different series of use cases on Horizon OS. Some that work really, really well in immersive and 3D, and others that are best met by an Android app. This is an example of one of those. So let's say an immersive experience is something like a game, right? A shooting game is really best in a 3D experience, or an immersive meditation experience, right? That is really great as an immersive experience. But this is an example. This is Spatial Phone, made by someone here in the audience. And Spatial Phone is a virtual representation of your actual phone, right? What you can do is you can see your screen, and if you click a button on the virtual version, it actually clicks the button on your phone, right? This is something that just makes a lot more sense in 2D than in 3D. Your phone is a 2D screen, so it wouldn't make sense to have sort of immersed around you, right? So we're sort of establishing that there are these different patterns of user experiences on Quest, and you can essentially use Android apps to meet some of these unmet needs on Horizon OS. I believe there are still a lot of opportunities that are yet to be explored by Android apps on the Meta Horizon store. And I want to give a few examples of opportunities that I see. The first category of use cases is what I'm dubbing VR user problems. So this is similar as the previously mentioned Spatial Phone. These are problems that just come about when you wear a Quest headset on your head, right? There are things that just are unique problems in that situation. I'll give you one example from my life again. If my video doorbell rings and my phone gets notified while I'm in a game, I do not see that happening, right? So if I were to get a forwarded notification to my Quest device, I could actually go answer the door while I'm in a game. Another scenario of a VR user problem is that typing, I hope we can acknowledge this, typing is quite clumsy in VR, right? It's quite a difficult thing to do. So if someone were to make a voice-to-text note app that's sort of in the moment when I'm playing a game and I'm having a realization, oh, I forgot to buy something, I forgot to reorder dog food, then I could quickly say that into the voice-to-note app and it would just remind me later, right, that this is the thing that is happening. Again, those are not really use cases that are immersive experiences per se. They're really best met by one of those multitasking panel experiences. The second category is casual games. If you're sitting on a plane, let's say, and you're using Quest in travel mode, which is possible as of last year, I believe, then this is not the situation to play Beat Saber, right? What is going to happen if you play Beat Saber is you're going to smack your neighbor in the head with a controller. And this may, however, be a really good experience to play something like Scrabble or Tetris or a puzzle game or something like that. So I think there is a whole category of games to be explored that actually is sort of the exact opposite of an immersive, really intense experience. The third category that I think is worth highlighting is utilities. And this is sort of the evergreen category on all the phone stores. Things like AI assistants, scan-to-PDF apps, QR code readers. Those sort of experiences, a lot of those make sense in VR. And as an example, what you could do very well is something like the ruler app on a phone where you measure a distance between two objects. That would actually be really cool with a pass-through camera, and you can sort of walk through your place and measure a room's dimensions. So you may wonder how to bring your own app to the Meta Horizon store. And I'm proud to say that my team and I have done a lot of work to now be able to boil this down to a series of 3 simple steps. The first step is to make your app compatible with Meta Horizon OS. And the goal of this step is really to get to a working app, something that actually runs on a Quest device. The second step is to create a user experience that is really engaging to a virtual reality user and really seems like the app was designed for virtual reality. And the third step is testing your app on a Quest device and then publishing it on the store. Let's go into a little bit of detail about this. Starting with the first step, here we go. Starting with the first step of making your app compatible with Horizon OS. Now, Horizon OS is an AOSP-based operating system, right? What that means in practice is that there are certain dependencies that just don't work on Horizon OS, which do work on vanilla Android. And an example of that is, let's say, the Google notification service. If your app uses the Google notification service, then you have to replace that with a sort of substitute service that we provide for Horizon OS. And that is something that just needs to be done in order for the app to run on Horizon OS. The second sort of unsupported thing that's worth calling out is there are certain permissions that just don't work on a Quest. And the reason is that a Quest is just not a phone. So for example, you may have a mobile app that requires the permission to place phone calls, right? This is like a frequent thing that it does, like a Google Maps sort of version where you click the business's phone number and then you call. A Quest cannot make phone calls, and therefore this permission is not allowed on Quest. And you need to remove these permissions from the code in order to publish the app to the Meta Horizon store. This used to be very annoying to do. So what you used to have to do is essentially compare our documentation against your code and comb through and figure out which one of these is allowed as per the documentation and which one isn't. And what we have done now is we have released a plugin for Android Studio, which you can install, and it essentially does most of this for you. Let me show you how this works. So this is Android Studio, and you can go to the plugin marketplace on Android Studio, type Meta Horizon, and it will install this plugin, which will then, from then on, just be part of your Android Studio experience. Once it's finished installing, it will show you a welcome screen like this that essentially just means that it's now ready for you to be used. And then from then on, whenever you're in a project, linters like this will appear, where it will say, this permission just doesn't work on Meta Horizon OS, and it will link you to the correct sort of alternative to be used instead. So if you click on this Learn More button here, it will take you to the exact page on our documentation where you will learn how to deal with this problem. But then we also know that most of you use AI to assist you in coding work. So what we're happy to announce is that very soon we're going to launch our own MCP server for Meta Horizon OS, which you can essentially use sort of as a summary of everything that we write in our documentation, as well as all of the tools that we provide to developers. And what this should let you do is you should be able to connect that to your AI assistant of choice. This is Gemini because it's built into Android Studio. And in there, you should be able to say, just do all this stuff for me, right? Like, I just don't want to worry about which permissions are allowed in my application, and it should just sort of fix that for me, and that should theoretically then take care of that for you. This is coming soon, so stay tuned on this one. The second step that is required to bring your app is to create an amazing user experience. And I want to make clear that this second step is actually optional. For some applications, this is actually not that relevant. If you make, for example, a VPN app, users don't buy your VPN app for the purpose of an amazing user experience, right? They buy it for security, and they buy it for speed and things like that, where you should probably spend your energy. But if you make, for example, a movie player, there is a tremendous difference in the user experience that you can create, and it will probably drive significant increases in the popularity of your app if you invest in this space. I want to show you a few sort of high-leverage things you can do to create an experience that will make it seem like your app was really designed for VR instead of being designed for a phone. Here's the first one. This is actually a very simple change, and it makes a huge difference. So changing the panel sizing and orientation is one of the biggest leverage things you can do. A normal Android app will appear like this on Horizon OS, and it essentially looks like a phone, right? But what you can do is if you change the default height and width of the application in your manifest file, then what will happen is it will turn it into a landscape format, which will make it, now the change will come in a second, it will make it seem so much more natural to be used. Isn't this an amazing difference of such a small change? The next change I also find very exciting, which is multi-panel activities. So if you have a normal application on a phone or on a tablet, it's restricted to sort of one window because your phone is one screen. But on a Quest, you have so much real estate that you could theoretically use for your application. So what you can do is you can move actually different activities of your application into other panels. And I'll give you one example. So let's say you have your movie playing in one panel. You could put the settings of the playing experience in the other panel to say subtitles, speed, these sort of things could be in another panel. And in yet another panel, you could put information about the movie, right? You could put like a description or something like that, which would then make it really more of a virtual reality movie playing experience. What's really cool is that the work required for this is actually fairly minimal because we integrate with the Android Activities Framework, which is sort of already part of a normal Android app. And this will make it possible for you to just open a new activity in a new window. Selfie camera is a completely new capability that we launched this year. And this is a really good improvement for Android apps. So what used to happen is that if your app used to try to access the front-facing camera of your phone, and you put that app on a Quest, then you couldn't use that app at all. This is one of those prohibited permissions that I was talking about, right? We previously concluded Quest doesn't have a front-facing camera, therefore app is not allowed. But what we have done now is we've mapped your avatar representation to the selfie camera, which means if your app tries to access the front-facing camera, we show your representation instead. And this should just work out of the box. So there is no work required from you, and you can just bring your phone app to the Horizon store, and it will work like this. This unlocks some interesting use cases. So here's the Zoom app, which we launched this year. And what you can actually now do is you can have Zoom meetings on a Quest. And what other people see is they see your virtual avatar representation instead of, obviously, your image. The most requested, probably, feature by developers that we've ever had has also been enabled, which is pass-through camera access. And we have approached this very similarly to selfie camera. What we can do here is if your app tries to access the back-facing cameras of the phone, then we now feed it the camera feed of the outward-facing cameras on the Quest. And this unlocks some really interesting use cases. So obviously, you can take pictures, which is sort of expected. But you can think about, for example, addressing login friction with QR codes, right? So you could imagine that you take out a phone while you're wearing a Quest, open a QR code, and you scan that phone with the pass-through camera, which would log you into your application, right? You could also think about object recognition as a really interesting use case where you could sort of walk around your room, look at something, and ask, what am I looking at? And an AI assistant could explain to you what that is. So this is pass-through camera. Again, the work required to implement this into your app is very minimal because we're approaching this as if it were just a camera on an Android device. But the use cases this unlocks are very, very interesting. Here is a recording of, this is filmed through the lens of a Quest. And here is just like, I think this is somewhere in one of the rooms nearby. This is the experience of someone wearing a Quest and just filming what is going on around them. And this is the feed that would be sent to your app that you can use for whatever you like. Now, we have arrived at, we have a working app, and we have optimized the user experience to be really VR friendly, right? This seems much more like a more natural experience for a VR device to be used. And now the last step is to test the app and then put it on the store. And there's some really interesting announcements that we can actually make in this space. So the simplest way to test your application is to use your Android Studio as your IDE and then plug in the Quest via USB cable, which will then make your Quest appear in Android Studio as if it were a phone or a tablet or anything like that. And then you can test your application on that device. I'll show you in a second what that looks like. But the nice thing is that this essentially is the same workflow that Android developers are already used to from all the other devices that they use. So here you can see that on the top, where it usually would say mobile phone or something like that, it says Quest 3S. And when you hit the play button, it then appears on the Quest device. The project that you're working on will appear on the Quest device. From then, you can wear the Quest and sort of experience like a user would. Or you can cast the screen back to your computer, like it's done here, and you can see what is going on the Quest, and you can sort of check it this way. But we know that not everyone has a Quest device. So we are excited to announce Meta Spatial Simulator, which is essentially the capability to do the same thing, but without the Quest device. This is a desktop simulation product that you can use to test your project sort of in real time. And we think this has two benefits. The first one is that, again, like you don't need a Quest necessarily to do this. And the second benefit is that we think that iteration cycles will just increase as we use more and more AI in the coding sort of workflows, right? So if you think about, for example, if I give an AI command to change the panel size, let's say, while that used to maybe take 10 minutes, and then I want to see the difference in the sort of user experience, now it may take one singular command, and I want to see that difference again, right? So we think that the workflow will much more become like give one command and see the difference on the device, where sending it to the device and sort of compiling every time actually becomes quite the bottleneck. And therefore, we think that Spatial Simulator will make a big difference in letting you sort of test and iterate much more frequently. Here's what this looks like. So in the plugin for Android Studio that we create, there will be an entry point for Spatial Simulator, which will then open your application. And this is a very sort of short demo of this, but this will open your application to be run in a sort of desktop-based window, which is essentially a Quest device, but here. This is similar to our MCP server. This is coming soon, and stay tuned. The last step is to publish to the Meta Horizon store. So in order to do this, you need a working application, which we have achieved, and it needs to meet some sort of minimum requirements. But this is really all you need in order to now be ready to publish to the store. The other thing you need is a free developer account, which you can get on our website. And then you can put it on the store by uploading it, by generating an APK file and then uploading it to the store. I'll show you in a second what that looks like. The thing that's worth noting is the sort of myriad of monetization options that you have for your application. So we support free apps, paid apps, subscription apps, in-app purchases, and the one that I particularly like, which I would like to see more of, is try before you buy. So this is a really interesting concept where you can have sort of 10 minutes usage for free, and then it will prompt you to turn into a paid app, which I think is a very interesting monetization model for these kinds of applications that I was talking about. Let me show you what uploading looks like. So in Android Studio, you go to export an APK file. And this is the same as you would for any other device. And when you have done so, it will do this, spit out an APK file that you can save wherever you like. And then you open MetaQuest Developer Hub, which is sort of our companion application. You go to your app that you want to create, and then you upload the APK file. And this is really all you need to do. After this is done, you'll be prompted to add a title for your app, imagery, and a description. But this is fundamentally the work that is needed in order to put an app on the Meta Horizon store. Now we have arrived at the stage where your app is on the Meta Horizon store. And what we're going to do now is we're going to shift this into a bit of a Q&A, where I'm going to have one of the lead engineers on all of this come join me on the stage, Travis Rodriguez.
Hi, I'm Travis.
So if you have any questions about this stuff, we'd love to ask you to go to one of these microphones. Or actually, you can also come if that's easier. And we're here for your questions about the build workflow or Android apps on Horizon OS.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. You mentioned that in Quest you can have multiple panels for your Android app. Can you have multiple Android apps running at the same time, or is it just one running at once?
Yeah, you can, the shell windows that you see there, they support 3 panels at a time right now. And so you can have 3 different apps, 3 of the same app. The user gets to choose what they put in those panels. When you open a panel, it'll, I believe, default to one of those 3 panel slots.
Cool. And then one other quick question. Do you have to do anything special to adjust the input from like tap and swipe, or does that just work automatically out of the box with the cursor?
For an Android 2D app, you don't have to do anything special. It just comes in as normal Android input events that you can handle, like as view touch events or, pointer input if you're using Compose, whatever.
Gotcha. And can you do something to use, say, Quest specific gestures as new inputs to your Android
Yeah, I
apps?
believe we have an input SDK that allows you to do that. I don't have that many details on that part of it. I haven't really worked on that part of the flow before.
Okay.
One thing that works is, generally we try to make it as simple as possible, right? Like that you can just bring your app and you don't have to worry about all the different inputs that are possible, like hand tracking or controllers or these sort of things, which is useful. One thing that works out of the box is the Android back button, which is sort of a tricky one to replicate in VR, right? Like that's automatically mapped to one of the controller buttons. So this is something that we sort of do out of the box. And then if you want to go more custom than that, we have SDKs for that, right? So there are sort of various things you can do, but they sort of go beyond what works just out of the box. You have to sort of go into that specifically.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. I was wondering if you had an existing Android app with in-app purchases and other kind of specific store items, how you would port that? Does that happen automatically, or how much work is it to kind of, yeah, get the leaderboards and all that kind of stuff you get from the Play Store?
So we have a couple of ways that you can do that. The first thing to know about it is that you write those kind of SKUs and all of the details for your in-app purchases and everything into, say, the Google Play console or whatever. So you're going to have to do the same thing for the Meta console for essentially the same way. Following that, there are a couple of APIs that you can use to call into the set of SKUs that you've defined in the developer console. We have a compat library that allows you to use almost the same APIs that Google Mobile Services has for billing. And we've also got a fully, different style of APIs that function more smoothly with our backend directly.
Okay, great. And do you do those in like Unity, or do you do them in Android Studio after the fact you've kind of got that APK?
So if you are doing this in Unity, I believe those APKs all do exactly the same thing in the native C# or whatever you're building it with. There are also Java Kotlin APIs that you can do that way. You'll write these APIs into your code. You'll just pull them in. You can use Android Studio. You can use Unity to call straight into them. I believe there's like in Unity a single kind of mega module thing that pulls everything together, and you're able to just call into those APIs directly.
Amazing, thank you.
So I'm currently not in like the VR development space, but we have like a mobile application. I guess if we were taking like a mobile game and using like the panels, I guess, approach, that like environment in the background, is that something that's like exposed that we could like change versus like, I know like probably like a standalone application, obviously you can have the 3D environment, but like having access to, further immerse the users.
Yeah. So you want to?
I was just going to say I think the way to think about this is it's sort of a two-step approach. The first step is to take, let's say you have a game. You take this game and go through these steps that I walk through and put it on the store. And then once you've achieved that, then the next step is to sort of think about spatialization, right? Like to think about 3D, how you can really bring that in. And the best technology to look into for that is, outside you'll see the booth later, for Meta Spatial SDK. And that is essentially our toolkit to sort of turn your 2D application into a more 3D, special, exciting experience.
No, that's exactly it. Oh, yeah. Spatial SDK is the way to get to using the kind of immersive part of the device. You're able to control the entire environment and do kind of whatever you want. We've got tools for editing those environments and scenes, and it's all in our documentation. Tells you, step by step how to do that. I love the approach that Marcus recommended, where you start with kind of porting the 2D panel first, get that working, and once you're like confident that your stuff is running on a Quest, you've solved all of your dependency issues if there are any, and your like monetization and all that, then you can start pulling in all of the spatial experiences and making the whole thing one cohesive unit.
Cool. Awesome, thank you.
One thing that's worth calling out is, I think Spatial SDK is really cool to just sort of, like you can bring in small elements over time. Like a good example is Instagram in VR. You essentially have Instagram. Like it's basically the same thing, but if there is a heart, it like comes out in 3D. And it's such a small thing, but it's like an element of user delight that the user didn't expect, which I think like for a game, for example, is a very interesting thing to explore. Right? Like what's the one thing that you could do that makes it more special than on a phone? Dave?
Hey, I work with these guys. I just want to say Spatial SDK talk in this room right after this, I think starting at 3 o'clock. So if you're interested in that, stick around for the next session as well.
Good upsell of the next talk. Cool. Any more questions?
You mentioned that if you don't have a Quest, you have the desktop kind of simulator. Are there any callouts where there might be limitations between actually testing on a device versus the actual dashboard on a desktop?
Yeah, yes, that is an important call out to make. So the simulator isn't a full-on emulator in the same way that you know, the mobile phones that you, or like kind of the mobile emulators for AOSP that you'll find. It is a subset of the functionality that exists on Horizon OS. So there are some things that may not work exactly the same way, but what we've tried to do is make sure that the important APIs exist there so that when you call them, they're not going to throw exceptions or anything. They're going to return some sort of canned result. Some of them are mutable so that you can kind of stage your test environment. And we really wanted to build it this way on purpose so that people can do things like set up end-to-end testing systems that'll allow them to call APIs and get consistent results back.
Yeah, I think it's more meant as a way for testing that like these services work. Like for example, you want to send a notification or something like that, right? Like, or you want to test our billing or these sort of things. You need a way to test that easily, which isn't quite as easy to recreate on a device, right? And that is sort of the point of the simulator. You shouldn't expect that like a desktop can sort of give you the same feeling that you will get when you wear a Quest device, right? Like I really recommend like if you want to do this, if you want to bring your app, I really recommend to sort of test the different ways that your users may interact with your app, right? So for example, you can have it like in small, you can resize it to be really huge, you can use it next to another app, right? Again, there are various apps that you should expect to be run sort of on the side only, right? So let me go back to my example earlier from VPN. Like this is not an app that you'll have like front and center, right? Like you'll sort of click on and then you'll move it, and then you'll not think about this application again, right? So I think testing on device definitely has a value that a desktop simulation product cannot recreate. But the simulator has different values, like for example, letting you test our APIs more easily, or what I mentioned around AI assistance. Like we really think that if you type one command and you just want to see the difference of that one command, you don't really want to wait for all of this like loading and it goes to the thing and so on. You don't want to put on the device on your head every single time. And for that, it's really convenient, right? Like you can do this sort of, what is it called, hot reload, where you just make a change and it's there, right? And you don't have to wait for it to come to sort of be compiled again and these sort of things.
I really think the two big values of having that sort of simulation are, one, you don't need the Quest device just to get started to see what things are doing. You're obviously going to need to test on a real device before you ship it to a store, but you can definitely test a lot of things on that simulator. And the second thing is iteration. Lets you try things over and over, just like Marcus said. You don't have to take off a headset over and over while you're developing.
This one is quiet. Is it off maybe?
There we go.
Right.
What is the turnaround time once you submit? I know there's probably a different timing for the first time you submit it versus when you're making corrections and trying to reload to the store and stuff like that.
I would say it very much depends on the application, right? So you have certain applications that are less controversial. You have certain applications that are more controversial, right? If your application is it's a panel app and it doesn't do very much, like it doesn't sort of go deep into the system permissions and these sort of things, it's very quickly reviewed, right? While if you do certain other things, then it may be more complex. There are certain things that may be a bit more complex, like if you, for example, if you have advertising or these sort of things, that is just a little bit more difficult to review for us. Or if you have if you want to meet certain store policies that are sort of special scenarios, then it just takes longer. Yeah. Cool. Any last questions? Cool. Then let me wrap up. Oops. Let me wrap up. Today we covered the value of Android apps running on Horizon OS. And we sort of talked about why we made that possible, what use cases these meet. And we walked through the steps that it takes to bring your own app to the Meta Horizon store. We also walked through the toolkit that we provide in order to let all of you build this very efficiently and productively. And some of the callouts maybe that are worth making are the Android Studio plugin that we have created, the MCP server, and Meta Spatial Simulator that is coming soon. Also, what's worth calling out is some of the user experience elements that we strongly recommend that you adopt, like panel sizing, multi-panel activities, and the 2 different cameras that we provide. If you want to get started with this, go here. And here's where we've summarized essentially what Travis, I, and the rest of the team are working on. Right? This is the documentation of all of the toolkit in order to get started with Android apps and to bring it to the store. We can't wait to see what you build, and thank you for coming here today.
Really excited.